I think that it's always nice to remind people to pay attention to the news. It's in all of our best interests. It's in a duty that we all have at this moment to pay attention and to do as much as we can. My sophomore year, I studied abroad at St. Anne's College, just one of the 30 constituent colleges at Oxford. And I became involved in a student organization called Oxford Aid to the Balkans. The Syrian war had been underway for a few years, and refugees were coming into the Balkans in pretty high numbers. And so I was sent with a fellow student to start working with the refugees in Bulgaria. The children were most of the time blissfully unaware of their circumstances. They were bored. There was no school for them. There were just kind of these patchwork quilt of aid organizations trying their best to give them stimulus throughout the day. Our goal was to start a summer school, and we taught classes all day, 9 to 5. For the second iteration of this summer, OXAB, Oxford Aid to the Balkans, had, in order to get funding, required all of its, what they now called research interns, to do a study or a project. Since I was a student of science and was increasingly interested in public health and policy, I decided to do a study on PTSD. I found a questionnaire, a nationally used diagnostic questionnaire for children. The woman who designed it is named Prudence Fisher, and she's a professor at the Columbia Social Work School. And I emailed her, and I got a really quick response. And she said, well, why don't you just come over to my office and we'll talk. And so we redesigned it. My second summer was not nearly as pleasant as the first one. There are 3 refugee camps in Sofia, but the 2 main ones for Syrian refugees were Vojna Rampa and Ovča Kupel. And I did interviews at both. Overall, the resources were scarce. The organization that I worked with provided 2 psychiatrists, but there were just 2 women for a population of, at that point, was about 900. A huge portion of which could have used extensive therapy and resources. The interviews that I did with the camp psychiatrist were very troubling. Then there's also always a guilt that forms when you leave. So I started writing to try and find a way to grapple with it. Since it's always been an outlet for me, it was the natural form to go to. Since it was very difficult to speak about this with people, including people I would want to share it with, this became a really good space for me to write it down and give it form for the first time. So the collection of poetry that I put together, I called it Bearing Witness, and this is from a quote by a physician and human rights activist named Paul Farmer. It goes something like, however hard it is for those bearing witness, it is that much harder for those who suffer, whether in silence or with cries. I was bearing witness, which was emotionally taxing, but I was doing it for them. It was very important to have people heard. I transferred from Johns Hopkins to studying abroad at Oxford for a full year to coming to Barnard for my junior and senior years. And while there was a reason I transferred here, I'm really happy to have had the first experiences because obviously they led to my work in Bulgaria. And Barnard felt like a natural conclusion to this. It's the place I was supposed to be this whole time, but I needed to work through those other places in order to get here. And I'm finally kind of allowed to be the person and the student that I wanted to be, a much more holistic left brain and right brain experience, and studying in all sorts of disciplines, even if my focus is in one.